Welcome to this second part of the program on migration and diaspora. First part, we had Dr. Ajay Mahorkar talking about the issues and problems of both the countries, India and China. Today we have two distinguished guests with me, Professor Rakesh, who is teaching Hindi in China, and Varsha, who is learning Hindi language in JNU. Both of them actually teaching languages, learning languages, and both of them also have lots of experience in both the countries. I think we already got some idea about both the countries, but I'll be talking about, I'll be discussing two major aspects. One is the people's movement, actually, which have lots of impact on many aspects, culture, development, politics, every aspect. I'll be talking to Professor Rakesh. How to conceptualize this, both the countries having large number of people migrating across and learning different cultures, languages?
Actually, this process in India started very early. India had been so open. Even the Britishers came here 300 years ago, so we had that open access, that windows to rest of the world. And people started migrating from by their own also, and the colonizers, they also started taking people from India and China at the same time. So now if you go to those countries, Latin American country, Fiji, Trinidad and Tobago, or Mauritius, and then you find two major communities living and working there, and they are now the major part of that population, which is one is the Indian and second is the Chinese. I had a first-hand experience because in 1996 when I visited Trinidad and Tobago Islands, so there I find that the Indians, those who are there, they look Indians, their names are Indians, but their culture and their life, that's not Indian. That's something. It's not American. It's not British. It's something their own. So it is a mixture of, but very religiously they have hold to those few rituals of India which they don't want to give up. One is like a few festivals and names. They want to give an Indian name. Now even if you try to find out who is the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and you will find his name will be Indian name. But he may not have visited here, his father may not have visited here, because those people were taken from here 200 years ago by the Britishers to work in a sugar cane, same in Mauritius, same in Fiji. And that, my experience gave me a little different, I never thought that I'm going to face this problem over there. And the India, for those people, those who are there, is a dreamland. And it's just like a heaven. And they can't come here. They want to come here, everyone. And if someone have a chance to visit here and goes back, he is a celebrity there. Because when I met a lady in my taxi, when she knew I'm from India, she touched me. And she didn't, and she started crying. And I couldn't understand why she's doing that. And I went to another restaurant, or Punjabi couple from some Sikh family. And I had some breakfast there, and they refused to take money. I couldn't understand why. They are not a very big shop, small shop. I said, no, you must take this money. They said, no, you're from India. So I talked with some people. I asked them why it is so. And one professor, he gave a lecture in our discussion, and he told that India is, we relate India, how to survive. You are Indian, but so they found some way to belong to their motherland with a mythology, because there is no other way left now, and some rituals. So he said that in our families in Trinidad and Tobago, you are not allowed to touch Ramayana until you became 18 years old. It's such a holy book, but it has nothing to do with holy, because those people are not religious at all. They live a modern life, but Ramayana gives them that linkage with their motherland. which they think still India is their motherland.
And how they are related to culture and how they are preserving. Do you find any difference when you compare to Chinese diaspora? Because many Chinese diaspora also living alongside Indian diaspora.
It's the same. It's the same there, because there are two major communities I found there. One is Indian, another is a Chinese, and third is the local people. They are black indigenous people. But these two major communities, they have their own, like Chinese in living there for the last 200 years, they also make it a point they will follow those rituals. For example, now they must be celebrating Spring Festival wherever they are, because and names, they also keep Chinese name, because the human being always want to find its root and sense of belonging. And if somebody tells that you look like Indian but you don't know about your roots, then you as a lost soul. I give you another example. In my hometown in Himachal Pradesh, McLeodganj, there is a cemetery. Britishers lived there 200 years ago. They used to go from Delhi. They were posted there. And this time I went last week and I found their tomb. And my friend told me that one girl came 6 months ago searching for his grandfather's tomb. And she was going each one tomb and trying to find out. And she took a local help also, because she wants to see where my grandfather died. He died in India. So these things actually in a human, it's very important. And Chinese diaspora, you were saying, the modern migration started, you can say 30 years ago. Before that, but they were forced migration, you can say, because in a Chinese society 30-40 years ago, condition was not good, economic condition was not good, social was not good, and most people wanted to migrate and it was not allowed. So they used to they used to hide there were agencies, those used to take them different countries. But 30 years ago, when China started opening up, China also allowed slowly and slowly its people to go outside and see the world by themselves, legally, I can say. And if you don't want to come, okay, you are right to settle down there. So now many Chinese, like Indians, India and China are the two major countries from where the people go abroad. England or Canada or America or Europe.
Okay, Varsha, one question, because language is very important to preserve the diasporic culture. And since she is learning Hindi, I think she has some intention why to learn Hindi. In China, I don't think Hindi is so important, but she has taken the risk of learning a new language. What made you to learn Hindi language?
Actually, first thing I learned Hindi, I think it's because it's it's a kind of Sanskriti like, because the Bharatiya Sanskriti के बारे में मुझे बहुत जिज्ञासा था. So and then I started to like the Bollywood films, and I also think it's very interesting Sanskriti. So I wanted more to learn Hindi, and when I came to India, I really find it's a very good country. Sometimes there will be also bad things for me. मुझे याद है कि पहली बार जब मैं भारत में आई तो पहली बार इसीलिए रोया है कि यहाँ के चावल चाइना के चावल से बहुत अलग है, इसलिए शायद अपने घर की याद आया. और जब से न आज़ादी के बाद बात की है पहले, तो मैं भी कुछ बताना चाहती हूँ कि शायद लोगों को ऐसा लगता है कि भारत में ज़्यादा आज़ादी होती है, लेकिन मुझे लगता है अगर आज़ादी ज़्यादा होती है तो एक बार भी मैस हो जाएगा. जैसे भारत के लोग धर्म के बारे में बहुत ज़्यादा विश्वास है, तो ये भी एक आज़ादी है.
आप हिंदी सीखने का बाद कुछ एडवांटेज हुआ आपको, जब मार्केट जाते, जब इंटरेक्शन करते, जब कुछ जो सोशल लाइफ में मिलते, कुछ एडवांटेज आपको मिला, आप महसूस कर सकते?
I just want to know the culture in this country, and the language is very important to talk with people and know about them.
So how do you feel that when you go around in India and you speak Hindi with other people in Hindi, what kind of reaction you get from them?
At first, I feel more people, especially when they are rich, they like to speak English with me because they recognize I'm a foreigner. It's better to talk English. And then I feel strange that I'm learning Hindi. I want to speak Hindi. Then they will ask me a question that why you're learning Hindi? It's bekar hai. I say. But for me, I don't like it because for me, I'm a Chinese. In China, we have one language that everyone can speak and concentrate with others. But I don't know why. Maybe it's also because of Azadi. People want to speak their own language. That's why it become like this, that I want to speak Bengali, I want to speak Tamil. Then Hindi become a small kshetra ke log.
So how do you find the one language, and vis-a-vis in India we have multiple languages?
In China also there are 56 minorities, and they have 56 languages, and every minority preserve its language. The minority people, they have to learn 2 languages in a primary school. One is their mother tongue, and second is Mandarin, which is Chinese. So those languages also preserved there. But in India, as we all know, that we don't have, now we can say by default, English is our official national language because all the work is done in English. And there is a very interesting incident I would like to share. In 2003, when I went to China in a Peking University, and that year our Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, he visited China. And our Hindi department were expecting that we are now so fortunate to listen to Indian Prime Minister, that is from Vajpayee, who's a very good orator, in Hindi. Unfortunately, the speech was in English, and so the department people got very upset, and they made it a point to register their protest that we are learning Hindi here in China, and we make it a point that we should learn better. And when someone comes from India, and if he gives us a lecture in English, you tell us what we should do. In India, language question is a very complicated question. No one, you can't, because that's, I don't want to go in a history, but I think Chinese people, Japanese, Korean, all other nationalities, they take pride in to speak in their own languages. And we never say we are Indians. We are bifurcated in so much. He say he's a Maharashtrian, you say you are a Bengali, you say you are a Odian. That's a problem we face here.
How do you think this India-China diaspora, because we have 10 to 15% living abroad in both the countries, and this number is very huge. More than that, the impact is significant in terms of scientific, innovation, development, economic aspect like remittance, investment. So, what kind of thing you think we can learn from diaspora, especially when we have a huge resourceful community living abroad?
That's a very interesting experience I had when I went abroad, especially in England or in America. When we go abroad, actually, I thought that these people will open up, they will become a part of that culture partially, they will learn from something from their culture and contribute to their culture. The aspects you mentioned here, economic is okay, investment is okay, technological advancement is okay, but unfortunately, these communities, Chinese or Indian, when they go abroad, like America or Australia or Canada, you will find they don't mix up with the local people. They have their own China, small Chinatown. In Australia, you have in Sydney, Chinatown.
Same with all people.
Same Chinese people, they have a Chinatown, Chinese market, Chinese language, Chinese food, Chinese friends. They go to the office, their colleagues may be of a different community, but they are not going to come close to each other. They don't share. That emotional bonding never takes place between those people. It takes place in a second and third generation. And that this diaspora people feel threatened. So you see the advertisements, matrimonial, that Indian people living in England or America for the last 60, 70 years, they are looking for a girl or a boy for their children in India. The child is born in America. He doesn't know anything about India, except their father, mother is Indian, and their name is Indian. But parents force him. They don't want to lose their identity. So diaspora is okay. They don't want to mix up with each other. That's I have a feeling.
Okay. Professor and Varsha, I really thank you for this very good, insightful talk. But I just want to, I'll throw some questions like both the countries, if we see China and India, they have a huge youth population with the aspiration, and if we see all the demonstration and all this are happening, it is impassioned youth actually who want to do something, but they are not getting the avenues to do. So demonstration is one way which you observe in universities and other spheres. China and India, I think both the countries have to empower their youth and well equipped if they want to prosper in the future. Professor and Varsha, I really thank you for this very good, insightful talk.